Simplicity Research Hub provides independent expert commentary and thought leadership on economic trends within Aotearoa. This content is their own opinions and is provided for general information only.
Kia ora, I'm Marco Fon, and this is Life is Loading, a podcast where we delve into the challenges facing those in the quarter life stage. Retirement. It might seem like it's a lifetime away, but in turbulent economic times, changing KiwiSaver schemes and previous retirement strategies not being as viable as they once were, should these things be more front of mind? Mortgage-free home ownership has long been associated with a comfortable retirement. However, New Zealand's age of first home buyers is continually increasing. It was 25 in 1970, it is now 36. That means an increasing number of people will still be paying off their mortgage when they reach retirement age. Plus, a survey from Seek found that a staggering 58% of respondents did not think their economic circumstances would allow them to retire by 67. So, how should we be re-evaluating the retirement plans our grandparents had in place? And what the hell can we be doing now to feel financially comfortable when we reach our 65th birthday? Chief Economist at Simplicity, Shamubeel Eaqub, joins us today to discuss what this looks like. Shamubeel, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
So is the strategy of being mortgage-free before retirement age even feasible anymore?
Look, it's getting harder and harder. It takes a hell of a long time to save the deposit for a house, and it takes many, many decades now to pay off that mortgage. So we are going to find more people entering retirement either with a mortgage or still renting. And so the reality is that for us, we have to think about how do we manage those pressures, because we still need a home. Are there different ways of managing how we save, how we pay off our debt, and how we manage shelter? So it is going to be a more complicated and different feature than what we've been used to.
Right. So for people in their mid-20s and 30s, why should retirement even be on their minds at the moment?
Well, it's because life expectancy is increasing. We're going to live for a hell of a long time. On average, the typical person is going to live well into their 80s. So that's the good news. The thing is, you don't want your money to run out before your life runs out. So the trick here is to think about savings in the broadest concept. Savings for the rainy day, savings for the fun stuff, and saving for retirement. So all those different stages of our life are looked after. And the trick with saving is not some kind of flashy thing. The trick with saving is doing it regularly and consistently. And because it's really about the power of habits and the power of compounding, those two things together, when they come together, that's the power of savings.
Right. And we're seeing more and more people dip into KiwiSaver, obviously, for financial hardship. In July 2025, nearly 5,000 members withdrew their savings, up almost 800 from the year before. So should we be worried about this trend at all?
Look, I think there's two things going on. One is there has been an expansion of poverty in New Zealand. So there are some people who are doing it really, really tough in this recession. And for them, having access to the savings is really useful. Does it make them worse off in retirement? Yes. But would it be better for them to be poor and on the bones of their ass today? Probably not. So how do you find that trade-off between those two things? So the reality is, for me, it's more about asking those people who are able to access the KiwiSaver to kind of go through the current financial hardship. That's important because it gives them that rainy day fund. But there are lots of people on low incomes in New Zealand who don't contribute to KiwiSaver, and they won't be able to access money in hardship. So that's probably the better comparison, rather than thinking about it as a trade-off between the poverty today versus poverty in the future. It's about the cross-section of New Zealanders who are missing out. So my sense is that KiwiSaver at the moment, for many lower income New Zealanders in particular, is less about retirement and more about giving them buffers when bad things happen.
Right. So if the money is just sitting there, why shouldn't people use it if they are struggling?
Well, that's why we have the hardship category. So you are able to access some of that money when things are really tough. It's a really challenging thing because the design of KiwiSaver was really meant for retirement savings. Because the reality is that even though you and I rationally know that we should be saving for retirement, it's very hard for humans to think that far out because, we discount the future. That's a very human thing to do. And so the idea of KiwiSaver is to kind of save in spite of yourself. But we know that there'll be some people who will be better off having access to the money today. So it's fine to do that. But if you can manage not to touch your retirement savings, that means you're going to have, I guess, better choices, better financial choices, not just today, but also into the future. So I think it's a mistake to think that KiwiSaver should be carte blanche used for any kind of financial need. And the message is really around KiwiSaver's your retirement savings. If you have the ability to do so, make sure you have other savings as well. That rainy day fund that I talked about, that fund money that I talked about, those are the additional buffers that we also need, because savings is not only for one purpose.
Like we mentioned earlier, the average age of first-time homeowners has increased. Is relying on a house as a primary asset still as reliable as it once was?
No, it's not. But that's because houses have become so much more expensive. We are also just maturing later financially because more New Zealanders are going into education, tertiary education. We are coupling later in life. So there's a whole bunch of different reasons why those life stages have all been pushed up, including the lack of affordability when it comes to housing. So the reality is that we do have less time, and there'll be more New Zealanders who will be struggling to get debt free by the time they retire. What we're likely to see is people will stay working longer to make sure they'll be able to pay off the mortgage. And for those who aren't, we have to think about how do we save differently and how do we manage ourselves differently. The reality is that we are going to have more New Zealanders retiring either with a mortgage or still renting in the future. And for those people, it's really important to have a different way of saving, because the house is no longer that given way of saving for retirement as it was the case for previous generations.
So those different kinds of assets that you're talking about, rather than just the traditional house asset, they're always talked about constantly in the financial world. So why are they so important, and what sorts of things do they look like?
Look, it's relatively simple in terms of when you're saving. There are a few different choices that you have. Some very kind of short-term things like term deposits or savings accounts, or the slightly longer-term things like managed funds or KiwiSaver. The way that I think about it from my own personal finances is that I do the minimum amount that I must do for KiwiSaver so that I can maximize my entitlements. So I want to get all the contributions from my employer. I want to make sure I get all the tax and other subsidies from government. Any other savings that I have, I put into other things, whether it's investing in my businesses or whether it's investing in managed funds. Managed funds is the easiest way to do it. So they're relatively inexpensive. They're pretty hands-off. So the trick there is to essentially do it again regularly and habitually. So my kind of theory of saving is if you do it regularly, for example, I put a little bit of money into my kids' accounts every couple of weeks. The idea is that small amount of contributions every fortnight and the power of compounding together will hopefully set them up for a little bit of financial independence when they become adults.
Right. So obviously, growing up in this generation, relying on additional assets is going to be so crucial to us. Can we realistically expect the pension to still exist in 30 to 40 years' time?
The answer is absolutely yes, but not in its current form. So New Zealand Super is a really wonderful program, but it's extraordinarily expensive. Because it's universal, everybody gets it. My expectation is over the course of the next 50 years, we are going to see that change, but not by being it removed from New Zealand, but it becoming means tested. So only those who need it get access to it, like any other form of welfare. And that's what New Zealand Super is. It's a form of welfare where we pay it out of our current taxes. So, I wouldn't be too discouraged that there will be no support and no safety net. If I look at what happens in Australia, for example, roughly about 60% of Australians rely on some form of government transfer, like a pension payment. And 40% of people are self-reliant. That's big, and this is despite them having a compulsory superannuation scheme. So people have been saving in Australia since the early 1990s. They've got a much larger pool of savings, and yet it's only about 40% of people who are fully independent on their own money. So that's the kind of scenario we're likely to also experience, that I don't think we're going to see New Zealand Super disappearing completely. But if we're realistic, we should expect that over time, it will only be available for people who need it.
Right. So as we head towards retirement age as well, I have a statistic here. According to the Retirement Commission, 40% of retirees will be renting in 2048. If people don't see buying a home as a reality for them, what is an alternative for something they can fall back on?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of different approaches. One is around if you still want to have access to a home, maybe invest in a property or buy a property somewhere where you can afford it, not necessarily the place you live in, but a different place. So that's called, rent vesting, right? Where you're investing, but in a rental, but not in the home that you might want to live in. And so that still gives you a fallback option should there be opportunity that's available to you. But if you don't have that, really the trick is really around just having that broader pool of savings. So for each of us, we'll have our own personal circumstances. I may not be able to have what you have and vice versa. So the trick is to go, given your financial resources, can you put away a little bit every week, every fortnight, whatever it might be, and do it consistently and regularly over time? That financial assets, whether it's in managed funds or KiwiSaver, all of those things are things that will give you choices. There are no kind of easy rockstar solutions when it comes to these kinds of things. They're really boring habit kind of things.
Awesome. So with all of these things in mind, how can we rethink the traditional road to retirement?
Well, the traditional road to retirement in New Zealand had been you buy your home and maybe a rental property, and that'll set you up. That's not possible for many New Zealanders. And if that is the case, the idea is to think about, let's say you still get super when you retire, but that might not be enough for you to also afford rent and all those other outgoings. How can you save enough to be able to defray some of those costs? And the way to do it is to save early and save regularly. KiwiSaver is a really good start, but if you have the capacity to save a bit more, I really encourage you to have other forms of savings, whether it's a managed fund or whatever. Just put it into something else so the money is working for you. And it will still be available for those other bits of life that happen along the way. But the real trick is to make sure you understand that money is a tool, that it is there to make your life better, and money gives you choices and it gives you dignity. And it's really about making sure you keep in mind that it's nothing to be fearful of. And just because you can't own a home doesn't mean you have no choices and no avenues for getting that consistency and stability in your life. It's still possible. It just looks different.
So what are some other investments that people could consider? Some that are just outside of the ordinary.
Look, I don't think it needs to be sexy. And I think this is part of the issue with finance. Everybody wants to make it exciting and fun. I'm going to pick stocks or whatever. Like personally, my track record of doing this stuff is terrible. I've lost more money when I pick stocks than when I just shove it into an index fund. So I'm a big believer in having a managed fund or having a professional look after your money, because it just means that it's not a big stress and a load on your mind. All you have to do is do that saving of regularly and let time take care of it. So my advice to my children is don't try to pick the market. Don't try to pick the stocks. Don't try to pick anything. What you can do and what you can control is that habit of regular savings. Can you put a certain proportion of your income into your savings regularly over time? And I think that's all it is. It really does not need to be very complicated. If you have a look around New Zealand, there are many providers with excellent funds at very low cost. There is no reason that we should think that these opportunities to invest in financial markets are out of reach.
As you say, obviously investing isn't as glamorous as it may seem from the outside. So what practical steps can people take now? And especially those who think or may have the mindset of they have no spare cash for this.
Look, if you don't have spare cash right now, then obviously you can't save. And I think the starting point is always budgeting, just having a really good look at your finances to get a sense of what are your incomings and what are your outgoings. And also having that little think about what do I want? And are there things I could do without in the short term for something else that I want in the long term? The reality is life is always about trade-offs. There will always be choices that we have to make. And it's about making those considered decisions. And so I absolutely understand that for some people, your current income might not be sufficient for the things that you need to take care of, and that's okay. But when your circumstances change, you should be willing and capable of putting some of that money aside. And if you find that you're not getting as much income as you'd like, you can also ask yourself, are there things that I can do to improve my income? That might be around getting some more education, getting some training, maybe looking for something else. So it's all those things about increasing your incomes, but also in terms of making sure you save when you can.
In terms of thinking about retirement and that being so far off in the future, what are some key takeaways that we can think of right now and start doing at this young age, say in your 20s, that can help get you to a position where you can comfortably do that?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are really simple. The first is make sure you sign up to KiwiSaver and contribute, because that's really easy to do. And most of us will have jobs, and there will be a really easy way that will get you started. The second is around when you get pay rises, put away a portion of the pay rise into a managed fund on the side. So then you have an additional pool of savings. And the main thing about savings is habit. Do it regularly, do it gradually, and you won't notice it. And you'll have this big pot of money at some point in the future that'll give you choices, whether it's to buy a home, whether to kind of help you when something bad happens, like your car breaks down, or when you retire.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Shamubeel, for joining us today and taking your time here at Life is Loading podcast. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
That's it for this episode of Life is Loading. This podcast is part of the Kokako Network. It was produced by Marcus Allen, Alexandra Bogdanova, and Alice Homer. It was edited by Dom Hamilton with graphics by Anaya Pasha and Ella Dickens. For more content from Kokako, head to our website kokako.media or catch us live on 96.1 and Channel 200.